Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. So today I have a guest on the channel again and I'm joined by GGYGO. I had the absolute pleasure of being featured on one of his GG podcasts a couple months back, and today I decided to invite him on the channel to talk to you guys with me about Tearlaments. Like, obviously we need to talk about Tearlaments. Ishizu cards are coming and it's gonna be wild. It's probably gonna be a tier 0 format. All of us are a bit scared, but all of us are a bit excited. And we're also going to talk about a bunch of other versions because there's so many things to talk about with tier. And yeah, welcome to the channel. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you ever want to hear any more about Tearlament or see any of the playthroughs of the deck so far that I'll be posting, they will be over in the channel. The deck is so complicated as far as what kind of build you want to play, especially with these Ishizu cards, which I feel are mandatory, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The deck itself has just evolved in so many different ways. It's kind of like Striker in my mind, and the fact that like the deck started off as one way and now it's a completely other way to play the deck. So it's really interesting to see what kind of avenues you can take, and we're going to cover a lot of those today.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I'm just very excited to have invited you specifically because you make so much content about Tearlament already. Like, I know you're playing the deck. I know we have a bunch of like thoughts on everything we're going to be talking about, and naturally, like he said, like if you guys want to check out anything from him, I'll put everything in the description box below, and you probably know him already. So like we are just going to talk about a bunch of Tearlament things today. So yeah, I guess we can leave the Ishizu cards for now and we can just go back to the version, since we just had an event and people played a bunch of different versions, and also they played new support and all of that, and Darkwing Blast really introduced a couple very important cards for the deck. But to maybe start things off with an engine that used to be played before and now it's seeing play again because of some other cards, and you're just going to know exactly what I'm talking about in a second. It's of course the Brandon High Spirits. So together with you know, the Ecclesia or the Cartesia and the Albion, you're basically a bit more protected from Bestial, if you know what I mean. So I think that's why it's like seeing so much play right now.
I think that the name of the game right now is playing around as much as you can.
Right.
And so with the Branded High Spirits, you're allowed to play around Bestials, you're allowed to play around Reaper, you play better through things like D-Shifter, because you got to remember, when you declare your phases, a lot of times you can do things in the draw phase to play around like Droll and Mockery.
Exactly.
But you also play against a lot of players where you don't know when they're going to drop cards like D-Shifter. So when you have things like Branded High Spirits, you just go draw phase, have anything. And then standby phase. Do you have anything? So like at that point, because you can't leave a phase until your opponent accepts to leave the phase. So you just go draw phase, and you go standby phase. And by then, if they haven't dropped a D-Shifter yet, sometimes I will just wait till standby phase to drop my Branded High Spirits just to make sure it kind of like checks the area for the D-Shifter, because some people will just drop it right away in draw phase. And so you just kind of wait and see if it gets dropped, and then you can go, all right, cool, chain link 2, chain Branded High Spirits, and you can at least make some kind of a play. You can get to a kit, and then you can search your Soul EX, so you at least have something. So that's another really cool way that you can utilize your Branded High Spirits. I like it a lot, again, because Reaper only works if your opponent controls a monster, so this does play around that as well.
As well as Bestial, obviously.
And then the Bestial, you need to control a monster for it to become a quick effect. The only problem that I saw with Branded High Spirits, which allowed me to really make that last-second decision at YCS Minneapolis to just not play Branded High Spirits, was if you activate this card and you pitch your first name into Rekalos, and then you get crowed or you get belled on your first name, it's going to be a bad time. You get to search Cartesia. That means you.
That was an amazing South Park reference. That was dope. It was completely unintentional. Okay, continue.
With which one?
Oh, you say you're gonna have a bad time. It's the episode where they go skiing, and the skiing instructor is like, if you do this, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, you pizzaed when you're supposed to French fry.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be a bad time. And so with that first name getting hit, you only have 3 more playable cards in your hand, which is pretty rough and can be a pass turn depending on what those cards are. So playing this package is fairly risky. It's still very prevalent that a lot of people at Minneapolis were on Bestials.
Yep.
So playing this was definitely a good call. Having the Cartesia, there's a really nice play that you can do with this.
Cartesia is amazing.
Go, essentially, Branded High Spirits, you can dump your Rukalos, you can dump a name. Summon your Kit Kalos, you search the Cartesia. The Kit Kalos will search the Rhino Heart.
Yeah.
Then you'll normal Cartesia, you'll go Chainlink 1 Kit.
Chainlink 1, Chainlink 2. It's amazing.
And then you'll send the Rhino and the Kit, you'll summon your Rukalos. The Kit will resolve summoning the Rhino Heart.
Exactly.
And then you'll go Mill 5, Chainlink 2. And so you'll send a name. If you hit 2 names, you'll make Muddragon and Garura. If you hit 1 name, you'll just make Garura. Then your Garura and your Cartesia will make
go into
Baron.
Baron. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll have the Rukalos, Baron, and Rhino Heart chilling, but if you did hit another name, you make that Muddragon, so you
have one additional thing. Yep, exactly. It's busted. It's amazing. And also the Rhino Heart in this situation doesn't need to pitch anything. So it's just even more free, basically, to just do it.
Yeah, it's a very nice combo. I like it a lot. I thought that was really smart. I just think that, again, the risk of running into a Bell or a Crow was too heavily to really weigh out for me. I just didn't really want to do it.
But didn't you think, sorry to cut you off, but didn't you think like Bestial was a higher risk, essentially, with it just coming out and people just jumping on the Bestial hype train, because why wouldn't they? Because it's just an insane engine.
So in my list, I actually didn't play Bestials either. I just really didn't, I guess, care too much about like the Bestials, because at that point they just turned into other Crows or Bells. Like, yes, they hit the board as well, but as long as you're good at playing around cards like Crow, like, you shouldn't really have that hard of a time dealing with them. Yes, they add in a whole nother aspect to the game, which, especially Magnuma, just being able to search another one, is always going to be annoying. But at the same time, you're still getting cards out of your opponent's hand. You're still interacting with your opponent. And for me, I just wasn't really necessarily worried about a Bestial. I was really worried about getting hit with like Cora Bell, because a lot of the other decks that aren't running Bestials, even more like some of the rogue options, they would be leaning more on these other cards that are more generic.
That's what I was wondering, if you felt like they are going to play hand traps. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I would way rather risk getting hit by a Bestial than getting hit by something in my first name and then just having to pass turn on like 3 playable cards. It just seems a lot worse. Okay,
that's understandable. I still do think that like it's a very, very cool engine if you're going for that kind of version of the deck, because there's the danger stuff, obviously. Since like people are running the danger engine still, I still do think that the majority of them is leaning towards, you know, the Branded High Spirits, a bunch of new support, a bunch of trap cards, a couple Bestials, and there's almost no space to go for dangers as well. It's, for the most part I've seen, it's either Bestial or dangers. So I want to hear your thoughts on that, actually. Like, I do think dangers, like, at least in my opinion, they provide obviously the bodies for Curious. They're so strong going second, but I'm just not a huge fan of the RNG they will provide, they give to your turns. I think it's much better to go a bit more pure moving on, but like, what do you think?
So with the dangers, I feel like it's more so you either play dangers or high spirits. They're both very good engines, but typically that's what I would cut instead of using like dangers. But for me, I did play dangers at this last event, and I do still believe in dangers for this deck. The reason why I like dangers a lot, though, is because I play a very small package. I play 3 Nessie, 1 Jackalope, and then sometimes I'll play like a Bigfoot. The reason why I like that package, though, is Nessies are pseudo tier names. They're just dark attribute in their
Dark Aqua. Yeah.
So for me, I really like that a lot, just because of the fact that, like, if you're ever in a weird position and you have like a Rhino Heart in the graveyard or you have a Merly in the graveyard, you don't necessarily want to get rid of those, because Rhino's going to be for your Kaleido Heart and Merly's just going to be your free reborn. So I'd rather use like a danger name, just because at that point you don't really get rid of any advantage that you already had. So maybe not with like the Ishizu cards, you don't really want to play like the danger cards, but I do think that there's still a lot of say behind those at the moment, just because of the fact that like they do provide like some more RNG to the deck, but they're also just like free bodies on the board, like Bestials. And at that point, like, you're getting free draws to warrant that, as well as far as names getting hit out of your hand. You get free fusions off of that. So I still like the danger cards. I think at some way, shape, or form they're going to get played. When Nessie came back to 3, everyone was just like, wow, this is going to be a problem at some point. And danger, it was kind of wild. Yeah. I'm sorry?
And it turned out to be.
Yeah, and it's kind of wild, because like a lot of people were just like, oh yeah, like these are still very good cards, but like we don't think that they're gonna get played. I'm like, they will,
Oh
they
yeah.
will, and they, you know, dangers are still just very good cards in general. So I think they will still be seeing play moving forward.
No, I agree. Yeah, I just think it's interesting actually, like seeing some of the topping builds from Minneapolis, like people use dangers, and it was really reminiscent of the older stuff and the older versions, and it was just it was really interesting to see. But what they also used was the new support cards. So obviously you're still playing Solid because like why wouldn't you? But the new stuff, the Scream, the Heartbeat, and the Grief, what do you think about those cards? In my opinion, Scream is just stupid. Scream is really, really, really good. And Heartbeats just seems like almost mandatory. It's just a much better mine out. And Grief, I'm still sort of iffy on. But yeah, what do you think?
I personally don't like Grief at all. I don't think
No?
the card's very worthwhile. It's essentially just Foolish Burial because you can
Yeah, but
send
it's like
whatever you
better
want.
Foolish because of the way it works. Like if you guys maybe didn't know, if you weren't sure, like you can special summon it and get rid of the same one, which is like it's wild to me. I think it's really, really nice, but it's like you don't see it in every single build, and it just seems a bit too niche because at the end of the day, like people, not everybody played Foolish, you know, at some
Well,
point
yeah.
in time. So
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not really that great, just because like
yeah,
a lot of people are already cutting Foolish. Like, especially
yeah,
with the Ichizu cards, like you're milling 3/4 of your deck. My turn one the other day, I milled 28 cards. So my
yeah.
opponent hit Kelbeck and Agito. I hit my Kelbeck and Agito. I milled off my Scream and my Kid effect. So I milled 28 cards. So like having a Grief is fine, but at the same point, I don't really know if it's warranted. Like, I don't really know if it's like needed. But as far as like Scream goes, Scream is just like, if you can play 3 of it in your deck, you probably
Yeah,
should.
yeah, I agree. I think it's almost a
That card has
mandatory
3
three of.
effects.
Yeah.
And if your card ever has 3 effects, it's probably worth playing. That's all I'm saying. Heartbeat is one of those cards that I thought was really good this previous format before Ishizu because of the fact that you can target the fountain right away and get your play started. Heartbeat's still pretty fine though because it can add back your traps as well, which I think is really nice.
Yeah.
The only one that I really don't like is Grief. I think like maining the crime is always necessary because any board that you end Dweller solely at crime, you're just never losing.
Oh, for
that
sure.
game.
Yeah, crime is great. For sure.
Yeah, it's honestly just one of the craziest cards. It's so good.
Yeah.
But as far as like the spells and traps go, the only one I wouldn't play is probably Grief, and Heartbeat's only like a one of.
Scream being able to search crime is like, it's really a game changer, I think, because you are going to be ending up on Solik and crime almost all the time. So it's like, it's wild. It's really, really, really wild. I think it's amazing support. Also, since we're on the topic of support, Rolkalas is just so good, just because obviously you're playing around Nibiru and all of that. But I do think like the obvious downside of it being a water aqua together with you ending on Dweller is like a bit dangerous.
Yeah, and so that was something that came up too in testing that we talked about. Is like what happens when you have to end a Recallus Dweller. And honestly, it just came down to one of those things where it's like, okay, if you get Super Polyed, they pitch a card from their hand, they use Super Poly, so they only have 4 cards in hand. Whatever they discard, if they're not in danger, it doesn't really matter. And so they make like what, a Mud Dragon, and your Recallus comes back anyways. If the rest of your board is like solid, then that Super Poly was just never relevant. And so for me, I think that's really nice too, just as like a mindset. And also just kind of talking about Heartbeat as well. I thought Heartbeat was really cool. This is something that I talked about in like my testing group as well. The fact that like you can send Heartbeat if you already milled your crime, then add back crime, so you always have crime. So that's always like a really cool other interaction. But besides that, with Recallus as well, I thought that card was really cool. The card works very similar to Totally Awesome, and I don't know if everyone realizes that, but if you like negate a name in the graveyard, you actually just don't send anything because you don't destroy anything. So
Yeah, that's actually really important to add.
too.
Yeah.
So that's another one that a lot of people just like didn't know, and you want to make sure that you just know those types of rulings for events. But
Because like,
besides
I mean,
that, though,
people are going to try to send cards. They want a plus. You need to prevent that, basically.
yeah, and a lot of people just don't know.
Or
So
or
you wanna
that,
make
yeah,
sure
of course.
that you
But
are
you know,
making sure that you keep the game state as legal as possible.
of course.
But with the new cards that are coming out too, we do have a field spell and a new monster on the horizon too. That's not going to be here till I think like February.
Yeah,
But
it's in a couple months.
other things to think about as far as future support. But Root Colossus was definitely a key piece to the deck moving forward.
Oh no, for sure. It's amazing. It's actually like, oh, your deck loses to Nibiru. Okay, cool. We're giving you Rulcalis because why not, you know? The next thing we have up here to talk about is obviously the Bystios. Now, we did touch upon them a bit. All in all, Bystios, as just an engine, they're amazing. You know, they're just, I don't know, to me, they're just hand traps, but they are a body as well. So they're really, really, really nice. But I want to know your thoughts specifically on the builds with the bigger Bystio engine, because we did see a couple of those. You know, when people played Lubellion as well, the spell card, the trap card, like, I think they're fantastic. Like, I honestly think Bystios are an amazing, amazing addition. And yeah, what do you think?
I think the builds that are using like Lubellion at multiple are actually just really solid.
Yeah.
You have to really be just wanting to play Bystial the deck at that point. It's kind of hard for me to do that though, especially when post Ishizu, let alone like right now, it's basically you play like Tier or you play Fluendaries. And if you run into like the Fluendaries matchup and you have a ton of Bystial cards in your deck, like kind of a yikes, because at that point you're almost never being able to use them, and that goes the same thing with like other rogue decks that you could potentially run into. That's when you have to start just like banishing your own cards. The Regained and the Beast, though, I like Beast a lot. I think that is just another
This
mine
is
out in the
insane.
deck that's really
I'm
cool.
just hovering over it and reading it again. It's so insane. It's really, really good.
Even Regain, though, the fact that you can just get like the free summon, it also gets you that draw, that shuffle back. That was huge in Dragon Link already. The fact that you can go ahead and recycle cards like your Striker Dragon, your Baby Dragons, outside of even having like a Chaos base. So it does work out very well. The Bystial cards alone, again, being able to just replace themselves with like the Magnemite, having the Lubellion to bring itself back to the board too. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with like Beatrice. Beatrice is always just one of those cards that if it's summoned in a deck, it's not really for a good reason. You just know that they're going to be able to do way too much with it. So that's just like the theory, right? Like every single time you see a card like that at the board, you're like, oh, well, this is going nowhere good for me. And it's always really nice to see like the level 6 support too. I also joked about this the other day too, but we have Bystials and we have Visas, and I'm surprised we're not seeing any like Zulkin play. We could, but it's something that we'll have to see moving forward. That'd be kind of neat though, having like a hot red to the end board so you don't lose to Dark Ruler. Just flip Solic just to activate it, not to use the effect, and then just like hit Dark Rulers. So that could be cool.
That's fair. I don't think the extra deck space is like there exactly, but I guess you can try to fit it in.
Yeah, it's just a cool idea, especially if you're going for a build like that. It's something that could happen.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think Bystials are just, I mean, like Magnemite is so expensive for a super. Like that's saying something. They're so impactful right now, and it's just not only in tier, like overall as an engine. It's just really, really, really cool. So moving on to the branded stuff, what were your thoughts on the branded version of Tier like before? Because it's been a thing for some time now, and I never played that version. I think it's really nice, but my issue with it was that it's a bit too reliant on fusions. Like there's nothing you can lean back on if you get debarriered. So that was, I guess, my problem with it. But with the Bystio stuff as well, like if you've seen the 60 card or 50 something, or it was probably 60 pile, you know, with branded Bystio Tier on the feature match in Minneapolis, it was so insane, and the interactions are just incredible. They're so cool, and so it just seems like a deck that requires a lot of skill, but also people probably get confused playing, you know, around and against so many different engines. So I don't know. It seems like it has its downsides, but again, it also seems very solid on the other hand.
I think that it's a lot better now that people are finally off the copium that is D-Barrier, because like D-Barrier was very, very good against the branded deck, but if you activate that against Tier, never really mattered, because a lot of times too, if it's like a mirror match and that's getting flipped up, then you just make Dweller and pass, and then you essentially D-Barrier your opponent, because if they're under Dweller, there is not a whole lot that they really can do. I think that like the branded fusion variant, where we're not even talking strictly about the bestials, we're just talking more so about being
Right, the brand is the Despia,
like
I guess, the tier
Mirror Jade
Despia.
and Masquerade. I think those cards are really cool. I think Mirror Jade is still like a broken card. Having
Mirror Jade is so
Masquerade.
insane. Like Mirror Jade just tilts me by just existing.
Having like Masquerade's also fairly good against decks like Flu.
True.
So
Very
I think
true.
that going into a format like this where there's so many effects going off, potentially using like a branded variant and summoning out a lot of Masquerades could actually be pretty nice, just because of the fact that like there's so much happening, and then you're either on tier or Flu, that like it does warrant that a bit to actually try and go for a build like that.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point, actually. Like, I think right now the advantage is so important. And I guess the next thing, which is a cool segue into it, what do you think about runic stuff in the deck specifically? Runic being such an advantage-centered deck, you know, just building that card advantage, trying to get one up on you. Like, I think it's really interesting, but I haven't tested it, so I want to know your thoughts.
So to be completely honest with you, I think the runic cards are kind of garbage this format.
Yeah.
Specifically because Keldo and Mudora exist. These cards are coming quick, and so we have the runic cards that are trying to shuffle back from the graveyard so you can draw. But the problem is when they go Keldo, target those 3 draws. In my opinion, I think that is going to be very hard to play the runic engine. If you want to, you can definitely try to make it work. But moving into this format, it's definitely going to be difficult when we have cards like Keldo and Mudora. These cards are kind of crazy.
They're so insane. Like, I mean, I guess since we're talking about them already, like, why don't we just address the elephant in the room, which is Ishizu stuff.
Yeah, these cards are nuts.
It's gonna be wild. It's gonna be so wild, and I think the mirror matches are going to be insane. And I just asked Gigi before we started recording, like, do you actually think you can play another version in this current format, or you need to get Ishizu cards? And he was like, nope, you're getting Ishizu cards. It's just what it is.
So there's a lot of people right now that are having this conversation, and they're like, listen, you can either play just Keldo and Mudora, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. By just playing these cards, you control the graveyard, you can do all your plays. Excellent. But I think what you lack then is, if you're not playing like Kelbeck, for one, Kelbeck's a crazy hand trap, if you didn't know. Kelbeck also just like returns a card, which is nuts. The other thing that's really important about playing these cards is that if you open the Keldo, you can use Keldo, pitch another name from your hand, search another one, and then you have a free 4 on the board for Dweller. The other thing is that, like, these cards, Agido and Kelbeck, trigger when sent to the graveyard, and they don't have to be sent by card effect. That means they get triggered by cards like Droplet, which is nuts. So there's so many reasons to run these cards. Also, if you just play Keldo Mudora, again, it's fine to do that. But if you are going second and your opponent makes you mill 5 cards, I would much rather see an Agido hit my graveyard to be like, no, I'm going to mill 5 cards. And so you can use all your names and force your opponent's Keldos and Mudoras out of the graveyard before it's your turn. Because if they're just milling your deck for you, you're not going negative on card advantage. Like, you're just milling your own deck. Unless they Dweller you first. At that point, like, if you didn't have the Gamma or something to stop the Dweller, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But at the same point, like, I think that it's better off for you to really be able to utilize these cards. A lot of people are asking if you should play like the Gravekeeper's Trap and like Exchange of the Spirit. They're not worth it.
It's interesting because in the OCG they played it. They played both of it, like both of them. And the Gravekeeper's Trap especially was very strong in the mirror match. So it's interesting that over here, like, we've had the results from, I don't even know what the tournament was. Was it a 3v3 or was it a regular tournament? That's like post Mama that we just got some. Yeah. Okay, so just a post Mama tournament. Okay, so I've seen a couple lists and none of them played the Gravekeeper's Trap. Like, literally none of them.
Yeah, it's just like more bricks to add to the deck for like no reason. And it's not really to say no reason because it's a crazy Dweller effect. But at the same point, like, I don't really want to open my hand and see trap cards. I want to open my hand and see combo pieces. And so like if you are adding more garnets to the deck, then like you're inherently putting yourself behind by potentially opening up worse hands than your opponent. And so like you can already pump out a Dweller really easily. So like Dweller, obviously there's a few issues with that because like it can get hit by a few different things. But at the same point, like I'd rather just consistently make a Dweller than like potentially open up a brick because I want to do like something else with the deck. And then like Exchange of Spirit is like super win more because it's just targeting 5 cards over 3, and like honestly targeting 3 cards is
it doesn't
fine.
make much of a difference. Yeah,
like 3 cards is still insane. That's a DD Crow. Like you opened all 3 of them in 1 card. Like that's insane. Like it's so good.
Yeah. What about the argument of like not playing Agito and Cowback just because you would be milling their deck as well? It's kind of like, you know, if you're in a mirror match, yeah, I guess they're milling your deck anyway. So it feels like you don't need it because you don't want to risk playing a mirror match. Like when you're on like in game 1 and you don't know what's happening yet. If you know what I mean, like I don't know, I'm not sure yet.
I think that it's worth it to run all the names again, just because the fact that the more that you open, the more frequently that you're seeing a 4 hit the board, because you can go Kelbeck or Medora and pitch one. I think that if you are worried more so about milling your opponent's deck, you kind of have to look at the game state as a matter of, do I need to mill right now? If you don't need to mill it, then you just don't mill. I've had hands where I Shiren pitched a monster and milled Kelbeck, Agito, and Keldo. And then I was staring at it and I was like, well, I already have a name that I hit. I have a Keldo in my graveyard. I could mill just 5, and then if my opponent hits like a name or even 2, then I can just shuffle them back anyways.
Yeah, you can Kelbeck, but that's not Kelbeck. I keep mixing them up. You can Keldo. Like if you look at OCG, they played it, all of it, at 3, every single one of the names. I think one of them wasn't played at 3 at the beginning, but then they immediately switched it. Yeah.
Well, Keldo got limited immediately, so they had to play Agito. In general, the engine is very strong. I just don't know if it's worth it to just not play the cards, especially because for the argument that if you go second and then your opponent goes, hey, I'm going to use this card and mill 5 cards, like you just want to be able to net as much advantage.
Yeah.
Because like, if your opponent mills 5 and they make you mill 5, and then you have the Agito or the Kelbeck in your graveyard, I'm feeling very good that I'm going to hit a name off of any of this. And especially if you're playing any other cards, like the one game that I played, I started my turn with 8 cards in hand because they made me mill 10 with Agito and Kelbeck. I milled Scream, Soliak, and like I think Heartbeat. I was just able to just add cards to my hand.
Fair.
And I was like, that's crazy. And then you draw for turn and your hand's just massive. And then you just break the board because you have a massive hand. So I think that's just like another thing about card advantage and playing like, because there's a lot of builds that don't really want to play like all the tier spells and traps. But I think for the most part, if you're playing most of them, then you just gain so much advantage for literally no reason. It's so good.
Like at the end of the day, you can just Dweller immediately. But the Dweller, like, it does lose to Herald of Orange Light, actually, as well, because those builds are running the Diviner and Herald. What do you think about that package? Like, I think Diviner going into Baron is just so clean. It's so cool. It's just, I'm a huge fan of it. You're just sending your fairies. It's so free, and I think it's amazing, especially with the reprint, now that it's much, much more accessible. I think right now it really is the time to pick up the Diviners if you haven't already, because even the reprint can just go up.
I think that Orange Light, definitely mandatory 3 of. I think the card's very good. There's just not a world where I just wouldn't be running it. As far as Diviner, though, I don't know if it's really like necessarily needed. I think it's cool that you can go into like Baron. You can go ahead and dump a name out of your deck and mill 5. But it's kind of like the same thing that we just talked about too, where it's like normal summon Diviner, try to send like Kelbeck or Agito, and then you're just allowing your opponent to also mill. And it's just like never really seems that great. It's definitely a good card in that respect, but at the same point, I don't know if I would like want to run it. There's just other cards that you can normal summon, I feel like, in the deck that are just like much better, especially if you open like a Rhino. You kind of have to like make the trade-off at that point, because either you're able to send the Rhino out of your hand and reborn it, or you can just like go for your Diviner line too. But I don't really know if it's like that necessary, if that makes sense.
That's fair. But what do you think about like overall just being able to go into Baron and having crime as well, and like having the how to put this, like just having the availability of Omni negates, because that wasn't a thing in the tier deck before. And I think it's so important right now that we're able to search crime, we're able to go for Baron through Cartesia and all of that. And just moving forward, I also think it's something that's very, very important, because if you're not playing tier, people are going to build their decks to counter tier. So you need to have your counters to their evenly matched and all of the other cards that they are going to be attacking, like inevitably.
Yeah, and there's like one of the cards that I was thinking about, shout out to Cody Campbell for this one too, was Lancia. And like it's such a good card too, and it's like it's the only card that I'm worried about right now, because like D-Shifter is inevitable, right? Like if I get D-Shifted, I get D-Shifted, like it happens. But like if I'm only worried about,
we're just okay with it. We're like, yep, it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, like if it happens, it happens. Like
yeah.
Great, you know, but like if I get even lead, and that's my only worry about like my board getting broken, having a card like Lancia, A, says my opponent can't kill the Modora, B, I can't get even lead, C, I can't get Bestialed. Like there's so many different things that just stops immediately. So like for me, like there's so many different options out there that you can play instead of like worried about being able to put up like an Omni. Because like your board doesn't even have to be that crazy. Like when you start your turn, like you can literally go like Recallus Dweller Pass. Like it loses to like Super Poly, but like it's still like okay at the same point, because you still get your Recallus back, especially if you have like Crime or Celiac. Like you're still winning that game probably. You can also just go like Elf Dweller is equally just like a fine end board. It's kind of like the Dragon Link theory, right? Dragon Link always ended on like Seal's Pass with hand traps, or they'd go like Seal's Hot Red Pass, and it's because like the deck already knows that like it can kill turn 3. So like if you don't really have to put up that crazy of a board, and then you go into turn 2, your opponent like they might be able to break the board, but they're not killing you, and like you didn't commit too much to the board, so you have a full hand. So like at that point, even if you did get evenly matched and you only had like Dweller plus Elf and like maybe a Celiac, like what are you really losing to at that point, right? Because if my opponent called Battle Phase on me and I had Dweller Elf, I'm using Dweller, and then before Battle Phase, I'm reborning Merly, and I might just leave the Merly on the board. You could mill 3 and try to make it into like a kit too. That's like equally fine. But like there's so many different things that you can do to like make sure that you don't just like auto lose to a Dweller or to evenly match.
To evenly.
So for me, like even to a Dweller though, right? Playing like the Orange Light in the main deck, you're playing Droplet, you're playing all these different cards to try to play around it. Which Crime just deals with excellently. That card's insane too, ending on the Dweller Crime. That's another reason why we made that Crime too, though, is because like Crime is just one of those cards that like
just protecting Dweller at this point.
Yeah, you stop the evenly match too, and it's like if you have the second evenly match, you have the second evenly match. Like it is what it is. But they also have to go main phase too, which means that you're not dying that turn. You get another turn. So for me, I think that there is a lot of once you play the deck, you know how to play through and around a lot of these cards that you're more particularly worried about.
Overall,
yeah, even Lysias, I played Bahamut Toad too, so like that's another Omni negate that you can just use.
Sure, we have that to discuss also. So I think that's so cool. I'm a huge fan of that engine, but to me, it's like, you know, having the extra deck space taken by Bahamut Shark, just it's really a feels bad moment, I think, because it's so tight. But then again, like people play the Night Sword Serpent, and that being able to go into Bahamut and not just Rhinoheart and Mud Dragon, but because before, like I tested the Toad stuff, but it seemed like you're only going into it with Rhino and Mud Dragon, and it's not frequent enough for it to, I guess to me, to make sense to waste the 2 extra deck slots. Well, waste. That's a bad term of putting it, but like, yeah, it did feel like waste. But I don't know, with the Night Sword Serpent, I think it was a really cool attack from Minneapolis.
Yeah, I really like it a lot too, because even there was a situation where I was cut off of engine. I did not have much at all. All I really had at the moment was I had milled a serpent, and I had a Mud Dragon on the board because I super polyed. And I was like, I need a way to get to engine like right now. And so I overlaid for Bahamut, summoned Toad, and then I just linked them both off into Sprint, and I went Chain Link 1 Sprint, Chain Link 2 Toad, add back Rhino, dump early, had Rhino in hand, was able to just win out from there.
Nice.
So I think that there's
That's
a lot
really
of
cool.
like really cool tricks that you can do with it as well, just because of the fact that Toad's a 2.
Oh, it's wild. Actually, now that we mentioned sprint, what do you think about sprint? Because sprint is like,
it's like mid. I don't know. It's fine.
I think it's
but
great.
Like,
It's
you never
amazing.
like make it on your own turn unless you're in a really bad position. I think that sprint's better in like the bestial decks, just because like you have the ability to like summon IP, right? And so then if your opponent has like a lot of interruption for you, and like you don't really have much that you can do, you can go ahead and summon the IP, and then you can pass.
Yep.
Your opponent just does anything. You can bestial it. Then you can go IP effect, use the bestial in like a Druid Worm, and then summon the sprint. You can go Chainlink 1 the sprint, Chainlink 2 the Druid Worm, and pop a card.
Yep.
So like I like the sprint in the situations where like things aren't looking too hot, because like you don't have access to engine, and you really need to be able to get that last name out of your deck to be able to try to fuse. But other than that, the card just doesn't really come up a ton. I think that if I was playing sprint moving forward, I almost feel like you'd want to just play Gigantic as well and play like some kind of like couple of sprite cards in the deck, just because of the fact that if it's stuck in your EMZ, there's not a whole lot that you can do with it.
I think, and I wanted your thoughts on that as well. Like, I think the sprite engine is just, it's really, really nice in the deck. Like, moving forward, like, probably everybody's going to be, like, on Ishizu tier, obviously. But just having the Smashers as a mine out and as a disruption overall, like, even before when people only played the Jet Smashers, it just seemed really, really solid. And right now, with you not being forced to play 2 Elf, you have the sprint and the way to get into it with IP, which is a really, really nice play. I still think, like, sprite is nice. And if you look at the winning deck list from Minneapolis, again, they played the sprite engine, they played tier, and it's like they even played 2 sprint, which I think is so cool if they really had the need for it with the sprite stuff. I don't know, I still am a fan of the sprite engine. Like, moving forward, it might be a bit different, but yeah, I wanted your thoughts on that entire thing as well.
Yeah, and if you're playing like Gigantic, I think that it's really cool that post siding you can side in like a carrot, and then you can use that as another out for like evenly matched.
True.
So there's a couple things that you can do with that engine. Either you just go your blue and the jet and get smashers, or if you're worried about like a side card, then you can just go into like your carrot. So there's a couple different things you can do with it that I think are really promising. I think that some way, shape, or form, you should probably be playing like a very small engine. I've seen a lot of people do like 1 blue, 1 red, 1 smasher, 1 jet, which is like fine.
That was like
you just got to play double elf, and then you play Gigantic as well, which is a lot of your extra deck space, but like at the same point, it's still pretty worth it.
I don't know. I still feel like the smashers was worth it, and also if you got like shifter, it was much easier to play under shifter with the help of strike stuff, which was huge, obviously.
Yeah, it's always just a nice engine to have in the deck. It's not always super accessible, like when you want it to be. It's still it's really nice to have, but like if you're focusing on like tier plays, obviously D-shifter is always gonna be like a concern, but at the same point, it's not like the end of the world. Sometimes you can play around it really well. We saw that in Joshua Smith's list as well, playing like the Mannequin Cat and being able to capitalize off of the D-shifter being in the graveyard, copying the fact that it's a dark, summoning Chaos Hunter, kind of insane.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that you can do, but again, there's certain cards in this game that you kind of just got to accept they're there, and they are problematic.
What about the Scareclaw version of the deck?
So I thought that deck was really cool. I played against it at the YCS as well.
Yeah.
I think that it's nice in the sense that like you can do quite a bit, especially with like Vasas, but the deck itself, it can brick really hard. And I saw that happen twice, where because I didn't really know too much about like what the Scareclaw variant did besides like summon Baron. And I was watching my opponent like try to pop off, and the board was like fine, but I feel like committing so many spots in your main deck to like triple of the Reborn, 1 of the Heart, then playing like the 3 Vasas, this like the ability to just brick is way too high in this deck. So I think that it's really cool through no interruption, but the second I had literally any interruption, it just looked like the whole like idea of the deck just kind of folded. So I don't know if it's something that I would do moving forward. I thought it was a really cool idea though.
No, I agree. To me, it just kind of seemed like a bit of a weaker version among all of them. Like, I guess if you want to play, I don't know, any version, I don't think I would personally be picking that one up, especially moving forward. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it when it comes to the main deck. I don't think there's anything more we need to be discussing. But when it comes to the extra deck, a couple of things I put here in our little list that I wanted to mention as well. We obviously have like the rank 4s, there's Abyss Dweller, there's Redoer, we know all of that. But what do you think about Bakuska especially? Because Bakuska does see a lot of play in the OCG, which I really, really liked. And even now, looking at the list coming from the Post-Mama tournament, there's Bakuska in the list, there's Zeus in the list as well. And I think Zeus is such a neat addition. Like, if you're able to include Zeus without feeling like you're wasting extra deck space, I think it's just so nice.
So I think the Baguska is really cool. I think there's a couple cards that really do out Baguska, especially the field spell. If you're able to if you're able to get to like any kind of play of like fusion, be able to pop Baguska, having the Ishizu cards now means that you can super poly away a Baguska. So like that's also an issue. But in general, I think that the card itself does quite a bit, especially if you're playing against like Fluanderies. That just gives you a bit of time to just like figure out what you're going to do in the matchup, because your opponent can't really commit to their board. They can't really play the game, which is kind of cool because, you know, whatever we can do to beat Flu, we do it. But like in general, I think the card has a lot of promise, but like every single time the card has resolved on me, I just don't think that it's actually done much of anything. Yeah. Because you got to think, like, most times when you make something like that, you don't always just like blind Baguska because it's just like not the best idea. So like typically you're doing that when like your opponent already has things established, and at that point it just sounds like there could potentially already be like a Solia established already, and that just means that like end phase target Baguska is just not going to be a good time, right? So that's, for me, I don't really know if it's going to be that good. I think that it's really good in general, but like against like tier in general, I don't know.
Yeah, I know, it might be just against Flunder, I guess, at that point, and you do need to be prepared for it.
Against Flunder, it's an FTK, but like other than that,
it's really nice. What do you think about Zeus?
Being able to go Dweller Zeus is cool. It's always been an option since the deck came out, but like I've never really wanted to do it. I feel like there's always so many situations where like if I have a Dweller in my board or access to make a Dweller at the time, I don't really feel like I have not a lot on the board, if that makes sense. I feel like there's already other things that are there that I don't really know if I'd want to sacrifice. I think now it's better because like if you have like a Scream and like a Rukalos on the board, your Rukalos just comes back and then like your Scream searches you a card anyway. There's still a lot of situations though where like if I have Rukalos on my board and my opponent tries to play the game, being able to just mill 3 for free is still really fun. You know, it's just like one of those things that's like, our turn. But it's still important to be able to have as many cards in your advantage as possible. So going for the Zeus play, I feel like is a really like last ditch play to like get rid of everything, but it's still really nice though because you get rid of your opponent's Screams and Soliix and what have you without them being able to search. So there is a lot of warrant to both of them being very good, playing it and playing without it.
Fair. So when it comes to links, so what I put here for us to discuss about is Underworld Goddess and Borderload, as well as Unicorn for IP plays. To maybe start things off with Unicorn, I think IP going into Sprint is much better, and Unicorn would probably be the thing to cut. So I want to know what you think about that. And when it comes to the other two, I think Borderload is so cool. Like with people going into Automax, you just need a way to deal with it. And just overall, you know, to not to go off on a tangent too much, but Yu-Gi-Oh being a card game where you can pick any kind of card up because the entire card pool is available to you. It's like so cool to just see a card from so many years back, like just see play again, especially something as iconic as Borderload being such a, I don't know, cool one of the first Link 4s. It just seems so amazing to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a good card. This is a card that I brought up in a video not too long ago as well, just because I was realizing that there's a lot of cards that just can't really deal with the Borderload. It can be targeted by monster effects, so it can still be popped by like Perlerino. It can still be targeted by like the Solic, which is unfortunate. But like if you're just playing into a board and you've already addressed back row, then like the deck can't really do much to a Borderload.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I think that's really cool. And it also just like steals things like Kaleo Heart, which is really nice as well, just because like you get it on your board and then you can go ahead and use like the spin effect. So that's always really nice as well. Underworld Goddess, I don't really think that there's enough right now that needs to be dealt with. It's not like we have Agnister that's going like rampant in the format right now. So
True.
I don't really know if it's necessarily like needed. I think it's a cool card. I think it's something that is definitely warranted to be in the format at some capacity, but I don't really know if we like need it as far
I agree.
as right now goes.
Also with Mathmech falling off because of Bestial, you don't fear the final Sigma anymore. Another thing that was like really annoying to deal with. So yeah.
We also just have like Perlerino though to let us swing over it. I usually play, like,
for sure, yeah, you were just
too,
able to beat over it, but if you wanted away, like it's kind of cool to just go into it.
I try to max out on Bigfoot. I play 2 at Niagara Falls just because I want to make sure that I had.
I love Bigfoot so much. I think it's
like
so cool.
The bigger beat stick, yeah. I think the card's so good. I revealed Bigfoot like 3 times before it finally got sent out of my hand because I was under a rivalry. I was just trying to get my opponent to hit the Bigfoot finally.
Yeah.
So it was like 3 cards deep. They finally hit it. I popped Rivalry and then I hit him for like 9k.
Nice.
It was wild. I was like, yes, we beat the floodgate. But yeah, Bigfoot's really cool.
I like it. I like it a lot.
As far as like Unicorn goes, yeah, that card's just like not really that good right now. I think that it's in general always just a really good utility, but like right now it's like so not needed. It's not even funny. Like there's a lot of situations where like Unicorn comes up and you're like, oh, that card's really cool, but like you also already have a Unicorn in the deck being Kaleido Heart, so like you don't really need it.
And also like the extra deck space to me, like you might have a bit more space, you know, you can play like Zeus we talked about and a couple more, I guess, tech cards when it comes to the extra deck, but still like if we're comparing Unicorn to like a second Kid Kalos, you know, I would much rather play a Kid Kalos, even though like it's fine at 1. And I want to actually know what you think about that as well. Like I've played it at 1 for the longest time and it's like, oh, it's fine. I just need to try a bit harder to put it back to the extra deck. But at the same time, like it doesn't seem like there's enough space to play 2. So that makes me sad sometimes when I just cannot play without the second one. There's not many games that happen, but sometimes when it does, I do think it's like a big difference with having 1 or having 2.
I'm always playing 2.
Yeah.
I'm always playing 2. Always playing 3 Desires, and I'm always playing 2 Kit Kalos, you know? Like there are just certain cards that you will just stick to a number on. And it's one of those things where it's like with Kit alone, if it gets called by, if it gets bestial, like you are not hoping that like, you just get your Crime Engrave, you know, to get it back. You are really hoping that card does not get sent away. Having the other kit has come up for me a multitude of times, and it's definitely been really good, especially back when I played like EEV. There's just another thing where you can go ahead and make the field spell, make your kit a little bit bigger, and then like get rid of it. Then you still have like the one in the extra deck that you can use. Sometimes you want to keep like your kit in your graveyard too, just for whenever you want to summon like a Rukalos. And then you can recycle it later on, but like sometimes you need to make a kit to like get to that point. So for me, I'm always just running 2 kit. I think that is just way too important to run. So
as for the last card I put here in the extra deck for us to discuss is the Lingoriba because of Ibli. So what do you think about that? Like when cards like actually see play because you need to be prepared for something like Ibli. Because it is taking up your extra deck space, which I really don't like.
I mean, I just wouldn't run that. I would rather just normal summon and make a dark at that point. Like, it's fine. Like, if it happens.
But they give it back to you, though. It's like, you just get it back.
Yeah. I don't really know if it's, like, that necessarily, like, crazy. I also just haven't really seen a lot of, like, the Ibli lock. I think that if that happens, then it just happens. It's going to be like when you get Scythe locked or when you get like Ra's Discipled. It kind of just is what it is. I'm not really necessarily concerning myself over like what happens when I get Ibli locked. I'd be more concerned about a flu matchup than that, to be honest.
All of us would be. But yeah, no, I don't think I would run Lingoriba either. I just figured it would be funny to talk about it since like you need to be prepared for some things. But like you said, you know, sometimes you just gotta take those things into account and just be ready to deal with them and just let it be, I guess, if there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, I also just
main deck Droplet, so like there's a couple things that we're just already like on top of with that, so it's fine.
That's a really cool segue, actually. I'm really glad you said that. I wanted to touch upon a couple cards that people are maining in tier that are in tier cards. So you mentioned Droplet. We can talk about that as well as talking about Super Poly and Talents. I think especially Talents, like it's so funny because it's such a good going second card, actually. So opening it going first, it just seems sort of lackluster sometimes. But going second, it just seems busted.
Yeah, it really depends. Like all these cards, just kind of talk about each of them in their own regard.
Yeah.
Droplet, I think, is really good. I think the Droplet's always just really necessary too. Just for like
sure.
things that can go wrong in like the damage step, having like a Droplet. You have situations where Droplet will just automatically win you the game just because like you can send your Kelbeck, you can send a Budora, you can negate cards, mill 5, and like start playing the game that way. So you're never really losing any advantage. I think Droplet in general just is a card that I'll always play. Super Poly, I think, is really cool. It just has a lot of instances where, like, if your monster is going to get targeted in like a bad situation, you can always go ahead and just like Super Poly away your own monster. I've definitely been in a situation where I have Super Poly away my own Dweller, just because I want to make sure that it goes off. So there's a couple different things that Super Poly just allows you to play around. Also, the fact that like Soliak has to negate the monster for you to be able to send, so you can also just go ahead and like Droplet, or not even Droplet, but like Super Poly away your own monster just to make sure that you don't lose to something like that. The other thing too that I want to quickly mention that a lot of people don't know is Soliak doesn't have to send like a tier; it can send anything. Yep. So it's kind of the same thing. You can like negate a monster that your opponent controls and then send your Dweller. So that's another way to make sure that it goes off.
I think it's so important. I'm so sorry to cut you off, but I really want to say this. Like, I think it's so important to like differentiate between what card can send what, because it's so confusing. Because some of them can just send specific things, and it's like it's so easily for people to like cheat you. Let's be real, people will do that probably, and sometimes they don't know, sometimes they will do it, but just like if you're not playing tier, please learn which card sends what and what makes send what. And also like with the negate that we mentioned before with Rulkalos, you're not sending if you're not destroying. So I think those things are so important to talk about and to think about.
Yeah, and even talking about cards like Talents, and just seeing like how much interaction happens between you and your opponent.
Yep.
I think that it's another card that is just like, it's really good, but it's really bad when it's bad. If that makes sense. Like when it's bad, it's the worst card in your deck. When it's good, this card is godly. Like this card is insane. But it's like it's such a high risk, high reward. Because like if your opponent doesn't do anything to play into it, then like it's just a dead card. It literally does nothing. But you just have to find yourself in a situation where it like actually matters. Like if I was playing against Fluenderies, like this card is not in my deck anyway. Because like at that point, like you're just going to get destroyed by the fact that your opponent has a barrier statue and an Empen on the board. And it's cool that you can go like, all right, cool, take the Empen, but it's like they're not gonna try to do like Dreaming Town or anything until you commit a monster. So like I guess you can do that and then like wait for them to normal summon down to like a Ryza and spin your monster. At that point, like you're already down your normal summon. You're already kind of down bad
at that point you're scooping. Like, I'd be scooping at that point. Like it's not worth it. Nope. It's just like a rough situation to be in. So like you really gotta take it as it is, because like at that point you can always talent steal Empen, run over barrier statue, and they feel like Super Poly, I guess, and you get like Super Poly Ryza and the Empen. But like there's so many different things that like you have to play through anyway. So like for me, I don't like playing talents ever, just because I feel like it relies too much on your opponent playing the game, and I never want to rely on my opponent to play the game. I want to be able to like make a combo or break that board. Okay, that's fair. Okay, fair. I mean, I liked Talents, but I always wanted to play only 2 copies of it. It just seemed too bricky at 3, and I would always just play 2. So I guess there's that as well. And I guess maybe the last thing to round all of this off, since we were talking about tech cards, what's your thoughts overall on hand traps in tier?
I think they're fine. It depends on what build you're running, though. I think Imperm should always just be in the deck, because Imperm on Kit is just insane. Besides that, though, having Belcrow, I think are both still very good cards. I sided Ash Blossom, which might seem weird, but I think siding Ash is just respecting decks like Fluenderies and a lot of different rogue matchups. Especially like Exo Sister, Ash is just like FTK.
True.
So there's a couple different reasons why I side certain hand traps over mining. But I think Bell in the main deck and Imperm in the main deck would be the best hand traps for Tyrius, in my opinion.
Okay, but again, it does depend on the build, like you said.
Yeah,
So
always does.
I do think that's pretty much it when it comes to all of the cards I wanted to talk about. Now, is there anything else you would like to add? And if there's not, is there any tips you might have for anyone just picking up tier and being a bit scared to go into the Ishizu format?
So I think going into this next format, it does seem a bit intimidating. And trust me, it's not just like
It's really
a
scary.
few players. It's a lot of players. So don't feel like you're alone on that. There's a lot to keep track of. There is a lot that you have to know. Going into these matchups, though, you just really have to understand what your deck does and understand what your play lines are.
Yep.
Because even myself, I went into a tournament where I hadn't played in 10 months. This is back when Engage went to 1.
Oh.
I didn't know what Drytron did. I didn't know what Tribrigade did. And there's all these different decks that were just around. And so I was like, you know what I know? I know what my deck does. I put a Hercules base still in my deck because I did not know about like updating my deck or anything. I was just like, I'm just going to go and we're going to see what happens. And I went undefeated. And that's one thing where it's
wholesome.
Like, as long as you know like your win con, what your deck does, and you read a couple cards out of your opponent's deck, like what they were doing, like as soon as like you see one hit the board, right? You're like, all right, so this one's a searcher. You're like, all right, so if this is a searcher, then they probably have some kind of interaction to search for this. And then you read the next card and you're like, all right, cool. So like this is Revolt. This is a card that allows them to summon. I'm assuming when something gets summoned, it's probably not going to be
insane.
In my favor.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to like make these assumptions, right? And so like that's what I do whenever I play against things that I don't really know what I'm playing against at the time. And then I'm like, all right, so they probably have like, there's 15 cards in the extra deck. They look very link heavy, so it's probably going to hold like some generic cards as well. So I'd assume maybe like an Axis code, maybe like a unicorn. And so we cut off like those cards. We're like, all right, this card's under 1,000. It's really good if it gets sent to the graveyard. They're probably playing Almirage. And so I just make all these assumptions. And so like, as long as you know what your deck does and you start reading a few cards that you're playing against, you really can start making the assumptions as to like what your end board should be. So like for me, when I was playing against like Tri-Brigade, I was like, all right, cool. So these boards that they're putting up aren't very big. And when they hit the board, they have to banish for cost. So that just sounds like Widow Anchor is going to deal with a lot of this. And so at that point, you just set up like double Anchor, and then you're able to pass to your opponent. And then they go summon effect, Anchor both. And they just try to see if they have anything else, right?
Right.
So don't be intimidated by the new format. We're always going to get new formats that are just like the next craziest thing, and a lot of people are gonna be like, I'm leaving Yu-Gi-Oh, but like at the same point, they're never really that insane. And if they are that crazy, we've already seen 2 E-bans, so we can probably expect it again if we see something like that again. This game has already progressed so far that the amount of cards in the pool right now to be able to just counter a strategy are high. So that's something where I would definitely recommend to just like play a couple games. Don't overwhelm yourself with testing, but play a couple games, walk away from it, walk back to it, test a couple games, and to see like the interactions of the deck. Because the more that you play it, the more you're going to get comfortable with the deck, and that's as easy as it gets.
That's cool. There's probably nothing to add to that. Only if you're only just playing Tearlament specifically, if you're not going for any other decks. Maybe the last thing to say would be, we actually talked about that before we started recording. You can write down everything that's been used. Like probably you guys know that already, but if you don't, you can write down the names because the chain links are about to be insane. And Gigi mentioned like 11 chain links and milling, just a bunch of cards and all of that. You can write everything down. So just when it comes to names, like you can write, oh, okay, Hofina, Sharon, whatever, was used by you and your opponent, because at that point you are just maintaining a proper game state and it's legal to do, so do that. And also like physically moving cards over the playmat so you feel the most comfortable with them, like fanning out the graveyard, fanning out the things you want to put on a chain link, on a different chain link. Like you can do all of that, just make sure to put them in the correct order back into the graveyard. So I guess it's like just physically being prepared for it. It's like physically and mentally, like you need to be prepared if you're playing that deck to go through a bunch of rounds, and just to think at every single point in time, you need to think about everything that's going to be activating and chaining and just happening. So I guess there's that as well. And just test, I guess. Just test a lot if you're trying to be good. Your deck, I mean, like you need to think about, like he said, about your own interactions and also how to play around certain things. We mentioned that in this video as well. Like if you know your deck loses to something, just think about the play line you're going to go for if you get hit by that specific thing. So you don't need to think about it on the spot because it's going to waste you so much time. And already you're probably going into time with a deck like this. Hopefully not, but if you are, you want to be prepared for almost every single situation. So if you're learning on the fly in the middle of a regionals, you know, it's probably not going to end well for you. So there's that.
You just gotta make sure that you're prepared. Playtesting is the best way you can. Lots of DV, lots of playtesting.
No, for sure, for sure. I guess that's a great way to round this video off. And I want to thank you for being a part of it. I had a really good time talking to you about all of the theory behind Tearlament. And yeah, overall, like, thank you for coming to the channel. I appreciate it a lot. You're always welcome back. And like I said, all of his information is going to be in the description box below. And please, guys, let us know what you think of this video. Let us know what you're going to be playing post Mama. I really want to know that. If you're going to be one of the Flunder or Tier players, or if you're actually going to play something else. So yeah, of course, if you like the video overall, like it, sub to the channel, check out all of the social media, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.